Hi, I'm Shannon from houseimprovements.com, and today I want to show you how to install Batt style insulation. Now this type of insulation could be used in any framed wall. We just happen to be in a basement today, but that really won't matter. The methods I show you here will basically pertain to any type of wall that you're going to do. So we're obviously working on an exterior wall, and like I said, in a basement. We've got, this is a particular style of insulation is fiberglass, but there's stone type insulations and other types that fall into this Batt category that pretty much install very similar. One thing with Batt insulation that you want to remember is you don't want to pack it into place. You don't want to compress it like that, because as soon as you do this, that spot is going to be a cold spot. It loses its R value there. This style of insulation actually relies on the air pockets inside the fibers to give you the actual R value. So just remember when you're putting it in to be gentle, don't just pack it in there. Some people are under the understanding, you know, the more I can get into that space, the better I am. And actually it's completely the opposite. So if you're using if you're insulating a 2x4 wall, you want an insulation that's made for that wall. And the bags will typically say right on them what they're for. So this is an R12, and it gives you the width here in inches and millimeters, the length, thickness, so there's 3.5 inches or 89 mils for a 2x4 wall. And it also tells you how many pieces are in this bag and the approximate coverage in square feet that you can get out of it. So, okay, so this 15 inches would work in the 16-inch on center framing. And if you're doing 24-inch on center framing, it'd be 23 inches wide. So that brings up one point I just want to touch on. Now that said, it's 15 inches wide. Now our spaces here are basically going to be 14.5 inches in between, because we're 16 inches center to center. So you're looking for about 1/2 inch of extra width and length to create enough friction to hold it in place. So once you get it in there, it's going to stay where you want it. Okay, you don't want it loose, too loose, because it'll fall out, or it'll have a gap where you're just going to have cold air that can travel right through. So those are just little things that you need to kind of be aware of. You are going to have to cut it to fit. Most times, it's two pieces is too long to fill a typical 8-foot wall. You'll need to cut a couple inches off or an inch off, or whatever the case may be in your situation. So don't just pull them out of the bag and jam 2 in there, because you're going to compress it somewhere if you do that. So something else that I like to do, now like I said, we're in a basement here. I've got rigid foam against the concrete walls, but let's just pretend this is the back side of the exterior sheeting on your wall and anywhere else in your house. Behind your electrical receptacles and switches and all that kind of stuff, there's going to be a slight void usually, especially in a 2x6 wall, but even in a 2x4 wall. What I like to do, instead of trying to get just a little bit of Batt insulation behind them, I'll attach a piece of rigid foam, depending on what thickness will fit back there. Cut it just slightly bigger than the actual box here, and then when I do my Batt insulation, I just cut out for around that. And this will actually give you a little better R value behind those boxes. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. You'll notice this, you need this if you're on an exterior wall. This is basically a vapor box around the electrical outlet. So when you bring your vapor barrier in, you'll seal to that, and that creates your air vapor barrier. So make sure if you're exterior wall, you have those on before you do all your insulating. Okay, I think those are the main things I need to touch on. I'm going to cut this bag open, and then we'll show you how to do the first piece. I should mention that all you really need for this is, well, I'll cut this open first and then I'll talk about that. So just cut your bag open. They're fairly compressed in there, so once you open it up, it's going to expand and get rather large. I'm just going to pull that out of the way. I should mention that you only need a real basic amount of tools and supplies to do this. Really all you need is a utility knife to cut it. You might want some form of a straight edge or even a framing square. As far as safety things, especially with the fiberglass, you probably want some glasses just to keep any fibers that get in airborne out of your eyes. They recommend right on the package wearing just like a cotton face respirator, dust mask basically. I'm not going to use that today with the little bit I'm doing. It'll be easier to talk without that on. But if you're doing any amount, you should have that on there. Some people will also like to wear gloves if they're really, having a bit of a reaction to the fiberglass. This stuff here really isn't even that itchy, but some of them definitely are, and especially older stuff is really itchy. So those little fibers just get into everything. But so that's the main things you need. I don't think you really need anything else. So if you do, we'll come across that as we get to it. So, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll just grab out my first bat. We already know these two spaces here are a normal space, so we don't need to cut the width down. I like to start at the bottom and work my way up. So the bottom of this piece is going to go right to the bottom plate of the wall. And I'm just going to cut out for my electrical box and the styrofoam that I put in there. So just take a quick measurement. And remember, we don't want it to fit loose. We want it to fit fairly snug. So I'm going to go 11.5 to 15.5. That's going to be right here. So I'm just going to make a little mark like that, and about 2.5. Oh, something that actually I should mention here. Let me pull one of these out. I don't know if you can kind of make that out. Do you see a 12 written on here, right here? Okay, that's just showing that this is an R12 bat of insulation. When you're installing them, try to install the bats with that facing outward, so that once it's all sealed and everything and they come to do your inspection before you cover it with drywall or whatever you're putting on, they can see that and they know what you've used for an R value. Some inspectors, I've never personally seen it happen, but some inspectors could get grouchy about it if they can't tell what it is and ask you to open the wall. So if you turn that out, or at least most of them, I know I get going along and I kind of forget on the odd one, but if you can at least get most of them out, at least they visually can see what the R value is of the material you used. Okay, so I'm just going to cut this out. Okay, so just simply get rid of that. Now the other thing we've got in this situation, we not only have the box, but we've got this horizontal wire here and even these loops below and above the box to kind of work around. So with this bat insulation, if you just grab it approximately in the middle, give it a little bit of a pull, it'll kind of split right in half like that. So now we can take this and tuck this first half in behind everything that's there, and then flop this side down. So I'm just going to get it in behind all this. Hopefully my body's not in the way too much for you to see. Okay, so we just want to work it around. Make sure we're making contact down here on the bottom and on the sides as well. Most times I've usually got it too low, and once I get it all in place, I just give it a little tug at the top just to bring it up to where I want. I just check around my box and my wires here, make sure there's no gaps showing, it's all in there nice. Flop this down, get it in behind all of these flaps on this vapor box. And you can see I'm not shoving it in there, I'm not doing this with it, right? Because we already talked about that not being good. We just want to make sure it's tucked in and basically, back from the surface of the wall. You can see I've got a little bit of a dimple there. It's actually not too bad, but generally what I do, I just give it a little bit of a pull up like that. I don't want to pull it too far though, where I create a gap down here. Okay, so we got our first one in. Make sure it's nice around the boxes. And that's our first one. So now for the upper one, just simply take a measurement. So that's 42. So I'm going to cut this piece off at 42.5 actually. Okay. Now this is where some of you might want to use a framing square. Once you do a few of these, you kind of get an eyeball for what's straight and what isn't. Okay, so we're cutting it off about 1/2 inch longer than what we actually needed. We've got the 12 facing out. Just tuck it up in there, get it sitting in here. If you can't see at the top, you might want a stool or whatever so you can go up and check that all out. Make sure you don't have any gaps. Make sure you got a nice joint here you can't see through back into the wall there. Okay, so that's pretty easy, right? So again, we just want to split the batt. Here we don't have a box to worry about, we just have the wire. Just bring it down. Flip this part down. Get all the little edges just tucked in there nice. Okay, so just like that. Now we're going to have another one. It looks like we're at the same level, and it really should be, so I can just use that as a bit of a gauge. You'll notice I've got my knife fully extended, so you just need to be careful that you don't cut yourself with a razor knife. And again, we just finish off this space. Just like so. You can see actually I've got if you zoom right in, you can see I've got a little bit of a space in there. We don't want that, so we need to actually, the bottom one can be pulled up just a bit. Pull this one down just a bit. Double check that those are all good. I have a look up top. I don't see any spaces. There's a little spot there too. Well, it was just a fiber out of the... Okay, so that's your standard spaces. Now when we get over here, we've got a space that's a little bit narrower than this, okay? And we've got a space that's a lot narrower, plus it has these bits of blocking and backing in there. So we need to cut those pieces down to actual width. Okay, so basically measure it. Something like this that's, let's say, over 12 inches wide or so. That ½ inch rule on the width and height and everything, that works good. When you get into these narrow ones, ½ inch tends to be a little bit too much, so I usually go just a little less, maybe a ¼ inch in width on those. If you get it ½ inch wide on those narrow guys, it kind of puckers and doesn't just sit in there quite right. So we'll just take a measurement here of what we need, and it should be basically consistent. So we just need to make a mark and cut our piece lengthwise. And I'm just putting a couple guidelines, and this might be where you might want to use a straight edge, or in my case I'm just using a 4-foot level. Now you can see I'm compressing the batt down here to cut. Honestly, I usually cut right on the floor or on a piece of plywood. It's not working as good on the foam here because I can't push that hard. And I just take it right down on the floor. The floor is a little harder on the blade, but so you can see that just cuts off nicely. And again, we've got a wire down there, so we need to split our batt. Sometimes they won't split real great, but 80–90% of the time they split quite nicely wherever you grab it. So, okay, so just pull this down, just like we did before. You can see we're getting a nice fit on the sides. It's not too tight, it's not too loose. Pull it up just a hair. Okay, I think you got the idea for that. I'm going to skip this one for just, you know, it's just the same as what I did before. Cut it to width and fit it in. We're going to go to this one though. Keep leaving my tape measure over here. Okay, we got a few different obstacles in here. So we've got about 6 1/4. So I'm going to go 6 1/2 inches wide on my piece here. When you make that little mark with your knife, you can see it well enough to get your straight edge or whatever you're using lined up where you want it. Okay, so now, like I said, we've got a few different things going on here. We've got a wire. There's going to eventually be a wall here, so this wire is actually coming out and needs to come through that insulation. So just get a bit of a rough idea where it needs to be. We just need the height, and it's in the middle. We're just going to put a bit of a slit there, so we can pass that wire through. Okay, we also need to split the batt so that it comes around that. We can put the, we'll do it this way. So this is going to go in here. Just push that through. Okay, so in a normal situation, if you're just insulating a framed wall where there's plywood or OSB or whatever on the back side here right tight, you're probably going to want to notch your insulation around these blocks, because those blocks are going to compress it too much at that point. We've actually got well, just about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of space back here because of the concrete wall being out of plumb. So it's not as much of a concern down here, but I'll show you what I would normally do anyways. First I got to get it in here. I'm going to bring this up in here just to get it started. Okay, we've got our piece, our back piece here. Get it behind our wires, right down to the bottom. Now because of that block, I've got to kind of go by feel on where it needs to be, right about there. We've got our wire that we poked through there for the electrician. Now, what I can do down here is easily just cut this with that block. So it just sits up on the block, right? Okay, so we get rid of that. Here's our wire. That'll come through our vapor barrier as well. Okay, now at these blocks here, if you just take your knife, cut through, about halfway or so. You can kind of see here, I've got that piece. Just peel out the thickness that you think you need. Doesn't need to be this full amount, but this is 1.5 inches, so I'd take out, about 1 inch or so. And you can see how that just comes out and fits nicely around there. And the insulation at the back side isn't getting compressed now either and losing the R value that you need. Okay? So that's the basic scenario there on most of your insulation. Now the one thing that I don't have quite ready to show you is how to do an outside corner or an inside corner like we have over here. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring a little mock up here, and we'll just set that up and then we'll come back. Okay, so in this corner, and it's really hard to see, I know the glare on the poly is probably kind of bad, but we've got a stud here starting this wall. We've got a stud right here that finishes that wall, and it just happened the way the space is worked out. We've got another stud really close here too, so we've kind of got this type of situation right here. So here's our 2 bottom plates, here's our 2 end studs on those walls, here's our one that's kind of close, and this is just a regular space over here. So when you're doing this, and what I did is basically I had this wall framed, I'm insulating along, I obviously cut a little strip to go in here, right back here. Not a big deal, just like what I kind of was just showing you here now. Then, before I got this stud in place, what I did is I put my insulation back in this corner, because if you don't put anything in there, you're just going to have frost in the corners. Okay? Sorry. I should have had my mask on. Okay, so I make sure that's fully insulated all the way up. Now I can slide this stud over and toenail it in where I want it to be. Okay, now I don't want that space there, like what I just did by hand, right? This stud needs to be over. There needs to be enough insulation in this corner that we're getting that little bit of compression we need just for the friction fit. Okay, so nail that in, you've got that all insulated, and you just continue on just like we just did. So I wanted to kind of show you on this little mock-up, because it was just easier to show you than to try to just explain it and you try to figure it out on your own. So so I think we pretty much touched on all the basics. We do have some other types of insulation type videos, spray foam, that sort of thing, that you can check out as well on different options. But pretty much this would look after any type of Batt insulation that you need. So hopefully that was informative and it gave you all the answers you needed. If it didn't, you can always go to our forum on our website at house-improvements.com. Go to the forum section, post your question up there, and I can definitely answer it after that. So you can also, if you haven't got enough of us yet, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook, keep in touch with us, And you could also check out our Patreon campaign that we've started as well. So thanks a lot for watching, and I hope this was helpful. To fit into the openings, let's just start over. Frickin', sorry.